Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, taking another deep dive into this Oregon Ducks program and talking about a few more positions and players the Oregon Ducks could be looking at in the transfer portal as really talented names continue to enter into the portal every single day. And Oregon, although not grabbing the quantity of players that some other Power 5 programs have grabbed, the quality of players certainly extremely high for this Oregon program. Dan Lanning, I mean, getting it done on the high school trail, closing out on what was a phenomenal 2024 class, and also making noise in the transfer portal. If you're an Oregon fan, you're looking at the player development. That's been a massive check. You're looking at the talent acquisition for Dan Lanning the first 2 years in Eugene. That's another check. This is a program that is in a very healthy spot heading into the Big Ten. Want to dive into this program, talk about a few spots where Oregon could still add in the portal. Before we do, just want to say, thank you to you guys. The transfer portal has been a wild last couple of weeks. I've had just an absolute blast covering it, talking about potential targets, evaluating commitments. You guys have shown just a ton of support to the boys. Cannot thank you guys enough. I can't do this without the support you guys have shown, and the Oregon Duck fans, you guys have shown a ton of support. Cannot thank you guys enough. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And more importantly, would love to hear from you guys in terms of position groups, players you would like to see the Oregon Ducks grabbing the portal. Now, taking a look at what Dan Lanning's done, only 5 players in the portal, but the quality of players, absolutely phenomenal, right? The quarterback, Dylan Gabriel, a guy that, I mean, if he's starting week 1 of that 2024 year, every Oregon fan kind of knows what they're getting. You're getting one of the more productive and kind of dynamic quarterbacks that we've seen in college football the last couple of years. And you have the young buck and Dante Moore, who just dripping with the arm talent. And again, I said this, I'll say it again. I think Dante Moore has a very good shot at beating out or at least making this an awfully close competition in fall camp in terms of who's going to be the starting quarterback for Oregon in 2024, because the ceiling you get for Dante Moore in Eugene is extremely high. And you take a look at a few of the other additions. Matthew Bedford, kind of a guy that's played a ton of football at the tackle spot, at the guard spot for Indiana. You kind of know what you're getting. A really quality offensive lineman. Jay Harris making the jump from Division II football to Oregon, 6'2", 215. Like, that is a physically imposing back. And then Kobe Savage, one of the best defensive back safeties that was available in the portal. The quantity, not necessarily like some other programs that you see, but the quality is certainly there. And that's kind of what you're trying to do in the transfer portal. An Oregon program, they don't need to go out and grab 20-plus guys because this roster is already in a good spot. They just need to supplement this roster with a few additions in the transfer portal, which gets us to kind of the position that I'm looking at the most for Oregon, and that is along the line of scrimmage on that defensive line. You go back and kind of look at what has held this team back or maybe preventing this Oregon team from taking that next step. I think it's the difference makers up front. Brandon Dorlus, Jordan Birch, those guys were awesome. Obviously, Dorlus going to the NFL draft, and Birch, we're not sure yet. If you're Dan Lanning, you look at how you want this defense to operate, going back to his time at the University of Georgia. It started with difference makers on that defensive line. He's going to want to address that, especially going into the Big Ten. The first name I want to talk about, Derek Harmon, coming from Michigan State. This is a guy that is really just a force on the inside of that defensive line, right? 6'5", 320 pounds, carries that 320 extremely well. Phenomenal mover, really strong at the point of attack. You look at what he did at Michigan State in the Big Ten in 2023, 20 run stops, 18 quarterback hurries from the inside, 9.5% pass rush win rate. This is a guy that, I mean, kind of a plug-and-play starter on the inside, and I would think it's an upgrade over guys like Popo on the inside who weren't bad players, but kind of just lacked that difference maker on the inside of that defensive line. I think Derek Harmon certainly could be that guy, and you look at the young talent that's coming through this Oregon team, right? You look at the 2024 class, guys like Aiden Breland, Jericho Johnson. You want to supplement that young talent with experienced guys at the Power 5 level. I think Derek Harmon certainly one of those names to keep an eye on. Another guy that really just reminds me of a body type like Jordan Birch, and that's Nick Skirton coming over from Purdue. This is a guy that just hit the transfer portal this morning, just talked about him for USC as well. I think he's one of the best defensive linemen that's available in the portal, and what I love most about Nick Skirton, not only the numbers, absolutely phenomenal, right? 15 tackles for loss, led the Big Ten with 10 sacks. This is a guy that can do it from all different spots on that defensive line, right? Really good as a 3-tech, could move out to the 5-tech, 6'4", 280. He has the play strength to play inside, the athleticism to play at that edge position, and you can kind of move them all around. And that's what Oregon wants to do. They want to be multiple with their personnel grouping. They want to throw a lot of different looks at opposing offenses. Nick Skirtin allows you to do that. My favorite part about him, not only is an elite pass rusher, right? 10 sacks, a 20% pass rush win rate, 28 quarterback hurries, a hammer in the run game, 21 run stops. So you're getting the best of both worlds here. You're getting a guy that can win on first and second down against the run, awfully important in the Big Ten, but also a guy that when it's third and long, like he can pin his ears back and work from the 3-tech, from the edge, and get after the quarterback. I think this is a true difference maker on that defensive line, a position, again, that I think Oregon could improve heading into 2024. The last guy on the defensive line I think is worth mentioning, and I compared Nick Skirtin to Jordan Burch in terms of the body type, right? One of those heavy-handed edge rushers that can kick inside. Corey Foreman, I compared Jordan Burch in terms of Jordan Burch came over from South Carolina, South Carolina, and get my USCs mixed up. South Carolina as a 5-star that just hasn't necessarily reached his potential. He wanted to go be coached under Dan Lanning to kind of reach that potential. And you saw him do so for Oregon. I think there's still some meat left on the bone. I'm hoping he comes back. Corey Foreman in a very similar spot, 3 years at USC, struggled to kind of consistently find the football field. There was a reason this guy was a top 5 national prospect coming out of high school in 2021. From a physical trait standpoint, you just look at him. You know he has the juice. He just hasn't really been developed at USC. And quite frankly, USC fans, I'll tell you this, not many players on the defensive side of the football under Alex Grinch were developed. And so Corey Foreman looking at a spot, where does he want to go to? He wants to go to a coaching staff, to a program that is going to get the best out of him. I can't think of a better program than Dan Lanning and the Oregon Ducks and what they've done with this defensive line. Dan Lanning's track record going back to the University of Georgia. I would kick the tires on Corey Foreman. I get you're not necessarily getting wrapped up in the player you're getting right now, but you're excited about the player you might get if Corey Foreman comes into this program and reaches his potential. You get one of these 3 guys, maybe 2 of these 3 guys. And these are guys that I think come in immediately and make an impact on this team heading into 2024. Now, the last player on the defensive side of the football I want to talk about now, sticking with USC, so Oregon fans, bear with me, Tacky Curtis. And the reason I'm going to USC here is I like the talent that they had on this defense last year, just it didn't get developed. And Tacky Curtis played a ton of football as a true freshman for USC, and USC fans will tell you this. He wasn't ready. He was lost. He was missing tackles, filling wrong holes, lost in coverage. He was a young high school football player that was thrown into the Power 5 level and just wasn't ready. From a physical standpoint, there's no question about it. This guy has all the tools of being an elite linebacker, right? 6'2", 225, extremely physical. Just needs to learn how to play the game of football at the college football level. And you look at Dan Lanning and his development of linebackers that have those traits, going back again to his time at Georgia, Nakobe Dean, Quay Walker, Channing Tindall. Dan Lanning has been one of the best coaches in terms of developing linebackers. Tacky Curtis just needs development. This is a guy similar to Corey Foreman that can play the game at the high level, has all the physical traits that you want in a linebacker to play at a high level. Just needs to be coached up. I think Tacky Curtis would be a great fit at Oregon because, again, physical traits off the chart, just needs a little bit more refinement. He wasn't ready to play as a true freshman. I think that's partially why he hit the transfer portal, because he just, quite frankly, was mismanaged, misused at USC. I think he would be a phenomenal addition as well. Now, you could look at the defensive back room, but the way I look at it, like, I get you lose a guy like Kyrie Jackson, you lose Evan Williams, who I think you're kind of replacing with a guy like Kobe Savage. I am a fan of the young guys in that cornerback room. And that's when you got to be selective in the transfer portal. You don't want to just start going out and grabbing everyone in the portal because you don't want to scare off your young talent. I think Dan Lanning and this defensive staff kind of trust those guys like Roger Pleasant or Cole Martin to be dudes with another offseason of development. So although you're losing a guy like Kyrie Jackson, you lose a guy like Bridges to the portal, I don't think Oregon needs to go out to the cornerback room and kind of bring in 2 or 3 guys. I think they're really, really strong there with that young talent. Now, the last guy I want to talk about. This is one of my favorite players that's in the Pac-12. He's from the state of California, West Coast kid, Benjamin Urasek. Tight end at Stanford. Ferguson has been great. Oregon likes to use a lot of 12 personnel, have multiple tight ends on the field. Ben Urasek is the definition of untapped potential. This is a guy that, going back to his 2021 year, I looked at him and said, this is an NFL tight end. I still believe that. I think if Ben Urasek declares for the NFL draft, he's probably getting selected. He is a phenomenal pass catcher, really good at the contested catch point, works the middle of the field extremely well. He just has kind of fallen not guilty. He's kind of fallen over to the Stanford offense, just kind of sucking. And he hasn't really had the opportunities that he had. When he had Tanner McKee throwing him the football in 2021, he looked like the best tight end in the Pac-12. And so I look at a guy like Ben Urasek and say, what would Will Stein do with a guy like Benjamin Urasek in that offense? You have a guy like Ferguson. You have some young tight ends that I like, but I think Ben Urasek could be a difference maker on the Oregon Ducks. And Will Stein, he is a phenomenal at using all those weapons in different ways. You give him tight ends who are difference makers like Ben Urasek, and I think this would be an offense that gets a lot better. And again, going to the Big Ten, you probably want to run a little bit more 12 personnel, have some bigger bodies on the field. Ben Urasek, a guy that can block in line, that can split out into the slot and be a route runner and a difference maker as a pass catcher. Would love to see him in this Oregon offense. And you could look at the wide receiver position, but very similarly, like Tez and Holden might come back. But even after that, you have a guy like Jurian Dick. You look at the 2024 class, you have Ryan Pelham, Chris McClellan, a couple other names coming in. You don't need to go out and get wide receivers. I feel good about the wide receivers that are on this roster. Now, I know you wanted to go out and get a guy like Juice Wells. He's one of those guys that you just can't really turn down, but I'm not necessarily going out and shopping for these wide receivers because I think there's already a lot of young talent in this roster. Those are the names I would keep an eye on. Derek Harmon, probably my favorite. But man, like Corey Foreman, Tackett Curtis would be really exciting additions to this Oregon defense. Would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. Players, positions you would like to see the Oregon Ducks address. Appreciate y'all rocking with the boys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.